on strengthening the basis of fair multipolarity and coordinating role of the UN as a core mechanism to regulate the global policy and addressing global challenges, addressing the settlement of Ukraine, opposing the colonial practices of the West. Together with the partners of the global majority, we are keen to decisively go for the rule of law and the Charter of the UN in its entirety. Given the 80th anniversary, a lot of attention during this session will be devoted to the critical analysis of the performance and achievements of the United Nations. And by the achievements, we mean a whole set of those achievements, of positive and negative outcomes. The global organization has become one of the key achievements of the global community, epitome of the desire of humankind to set up an effective mechanism to ensure lasting peace, human rights, and socioeconomic developments. Now, what about the UN track record? There are many achievements in terms of settling international conflicts, strengthening the arms control system, disarmament, non-proliferation, fighting poverty and hunger. Peace-making operations of the UN are to be praised. Our country has contributed dramatically to the establishment of the global organization. To a large extent, the Soviet proposals laid down the foundation for the UN modalities, and Russia consistently considers this global organization as the one having the central coordinating role. This is the only intergovernmental structure that is able to ensure a painless transition to multipolarity. However, we have to recognize that the UN today is living through difficult times, to put it mildly. Increasingly, we hear that UN is facing challenges, is unable to pursue the tasks set forth by its mandate. While this criticism is well-grounded to some extent, however, the root causes of the current problems, the challenges, are not due to the inefficiencies or limitations of the UN or it being obsolete, but rather those are due to persistent desire of the Westerners to make it work according to their rules, the rules that only they know. And whatever they do should not be challenged, and all the rest should bow to the Western interests. Therefore, it's important that all the states should unequivocally confirm their commitments to the goals and principles of the UN Charter. The Westerners are trying to use the provisions of the Charter to their advantage, but, well, there are many components of the Charter that have to be followed and implemented in its entirety. This would serve as the true foundation for the restoration of the authority of the UN, and the group of Friends to Protect the UN Charter leads the way in opposing Western messages and building fair polycentricity. Now let's move on to our next regular section on the crisis in Ukraine. I wish I could speak more about settling this situation, but there are some other trends too. Let's start with the terrorist nature of the Kiev regime. The Kiev neo-Nazi regime continues to commit acts of terror against the peaceful population of our country. Last week, 110 Russian civilians were hit by enemy drones. 12 people died, 98 were wounded, including 3 minors. More than 2,500 munitions were shot at civilian targets. On the 29th of August, a drone wounded a civilian in Borisovka village. In the Zazula village, a man was hit by a drone in the village of Golovino. 2 individuals were wounded. On the 30th of August, a drone attacked a car and a civilian suffered. In the Smordino village, the drone wounded 2 individuals, including a 3-year-old. In Yasny Zori village, a married couple were hit by a drone. In Belgorod, a drone attacked a multi-story apartment with 2 victims. On the 31st of August, the drone attacked a vehicle and the driver was wounded. In the village of Murom, a civilian was hit. And on September the 1st, the Day of Knowledge, the drones attacked a truck, the car, and a civilian facility in the village of Borisovka with 4 victims. In the Graveron city, an 18-year-old girl were hit by a drone. The Bryansk region, on the 29th of August, the enemy drone attacked a civilian car with 1 victim. After the attack, the car slammed into a house, and this triggered a fire. On the 30th of August, the Banderite drone hit a truck on the Suzemka-Strachevo road, and the driver was hit. On the same day, in the city of Suzemka, the Maderavites used the kamikaze drones to hit the community center. And in the village of Krapivina, the drone attacked an agricultural enterprise. In the Donetsk People's Republic, on the 29th of August, the Ukrainian drone attacked a living quarter in Makiivka, and the shrapnel wounded 2 elderly ladies. In Zaporozhye region, on the 20th of August, the Ukrainian military shelled the Dnipro-Rudnensky war facility and with 7 victims. And during the attack, there was a concert with the participation of children in the facility that was hit. In the Kursk region, on the 20th of August, the enemy mine, the infamous Lepestok mine, hit Sergei Soldatov, the operator of a national TV channel. On the 29th of August, in the city of Sudzha, the Ukrainian Nazists destroy the monument to the founder of the Russian acting school, Mikhail Shepkin. Well, why Shepkin was in the way? Well, the only explanation is hatred. And, there is this person walking around, being hateful of the entire world, and he would hit anything, a dog, a stone, thus releasing his anger, hitting those who have nothing to do with the nature of this hatred. But this hatred has been in the making for so many years that this anti-lesson drove home. On the same day in Oktyabrski district, a 26-year-old traffic policeman was hit. On the 30th of August, a drone damaged the power station in Monterovo, and 33 settlements with a total population of 8.6 thousand people lost access to electricity. On the 31st of August, a drone attack wounded 4 civilians in the Belaya village. On the 1st of September, near the Popovka village, 2 men aged 38 and 28 died because of a mine hit. In Luhansk People's Republic, on the 1st and 2nd of September, 2 civilians were hit by drones. In Kherson region, on the 29th of August, in the Velike Kopane village, due to artillery shelling, a local resident was wounded. On the 30th of August, the drone attacked a civilian vehicle, and a deputy of the Alyoshkinsky Municipal District, Alexei Zogol, was wounded. On the 31st of August, the Ukrainian military shelled the village of Aloshki, and women died. On the same day, the Ukrainian Nazists deliberately shelled the humanitarian aid post in Aloshki. On the 1st of September, in the city of Golaya Pristan, an explosion of ammunition wounded a child born in 2013. In the Radensk village and in Aloshki village, 5 people suffered. According to the Russian military medics, the Ukrainian military uses so-called expansion ammunition, and this kind of ammunition is banned by the international law. Do you think that any Ukrainian ambassador in Rome, Madrid, or Brussels, or elsewhere were summoned on the occasion of using the ammunition banned by international law? Those who are very keen to uphold human rights? No, of course not. And obviously, the crime doesn't go unpunished. The Russian courts continue issuing verdicts to Ukrainian neo-Nazists. A member of the Azov regiment, Artem Filin, received 28 years behind bars, and the Investigative Committee of Russia investigates criminal cases against the Ukrainian military who committed crimes in the Kursk region. And Zelensky keeps talking about security guarantees for Ukraine. On the 29th of August, Zelensky presented his own vision of such guarantees, identifying 3 priority components, the way he sees them. That is, maintaining the current strength of the Ukrainian military with secure supply of financial resources and weapons. And mind you, Zelensky himself adjusts the strength of the Ukrainian military, putting to the front line of those mobilized. He's talking about providing financial and resources and the weapons to the Ukrainian military. These are to be supplied by the Western minority. He also talks about protecting Ukraine by its partners in this NATO light format. I think he's mistaking it for a cocktail. He also mentioned that this would be needed in case there is a new invasion. And finally, he's talking about maintaining the anti-Russian sanctions and the use of the stolen Russian assets, as he put it, to restore his country. Well, as to the third component, given the corruption and deep-rooted desire to steal anything Ukraine, well, nothing will suffice to restore the country. Even the military aid that comes to Ukraine in this critical period gets stolen. Countries that are donors that support Ukraine, but they're not donating blood that could benefit Ukraine. Rather, they bring in bad blood that is killing Ukraine. Well, those donors cannot force the Ukrainian regime to provide accounts of the resources the regime had received. Well, this would be a never-ending story. All the ideas of this Ukrainian leader who that are, in fact, identical to those voiced by the war party Ukraine are unacceptable, and they aim to maintain Ukraine as a beachhead against our country. Those are not security guarantees for Ukraine. They are guarantees of danger for Europe. It is quite grotesque to speak about the so-called new law. It's a quasi-law of Ukraine on the basics of the national memory of the Ukrainian people. That speaks about the war of independence that was started back in February of 2014. Just think about it. Obviously, in their desire to rewrite the history, the clique on the Bankova Street is trying to distort the history of the country. And they're trying to churn out as many new documents as possible with artificial definitions. But they have documents that were passed some 20 or 25 years ago, such as Declaration of National Sovereignty. It was passed on the 16th of July of 1990. The Act on the announcement of independence dated 24th of August of 1991. It's been 30 years, even more. Well, the conclusion is obvious. Ukraine has lost its independence. It is governed from outside and de facto has become a true colony for its Western curators. And there can be no talk about independence at the moment. And not because somebody doesn't want it, but because this is the state the country is in. Since the neo-Nazis in Kiev are ready to sell off the remnants of Ukraine and to sacrifice millions of lives of its residents.
Just for the sake of their own desires and the goals set to them by the Western community. And they keep pumping the Kiev regimes with weapons. And the European sponsors have never stopped doing that. And they proceed doing that with one single objective, to continue the fighting until the very last Ukrainian. On August 29th, the Defense Minister of Belgium, Ter Franken, participated in the unofficial meetings of the heads of the defense ministries of the EU in Copenhagen, where he announced that Belgium is about to deliver the F-16 jet fighters to Ukraine and provide a tranche of military assistance to the amount of 100 million euro. The Defense Secretary of the USA approved the procurement of Patriot by Denmark, an additional defense equipment to $8.5 billion, quote, for defense of the allies in the NATO and its partners, and also approved 2 military contracts for Ukraine to the total amount of $329 million for the air defense systems Patriot, and furthermore adjacent equipment to the amount of $179 million, plus continuation of the Starlink contract to the amount of $150 million. It also became known to us that the State Department has approved a potential deal to sell the IRAM missiles to Ukraine and the associated equipment to the amount of $829 million. The Ukrainian party has requested up to 3,350 guided missiles and also the navigation systems to ensure defense from those. And what is the pretense used for that? And I quote, that is to ensure and strengthen the ability of Ukraine to self-defense and ensuring regional security. Well, the obvious question is, how does that relate to Ukraine's statements on desire for peace, diplomatic settlement of the conflict, and minimization of the potential of this conflict? I believe those actions are exactly the opposite to the declared goals. We have been repeatedly stating that any kind of funding of the Kiev regimes would only prolong its agony and is fraught with serious consequences to global stability. Now, just a few words. I have received some questions on that, and therefore I'm going to comment on the plans of the EU to send troops to Ukraine. On August 31st, in an interview to the Financial Times and during the joint conference with the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk within the framework of the inspection of the eastern flank, the head of European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, declared that there is a kind of a clear plan available regarding potential sending of troops to the territory of Ukraine to ensure the so-called security guarantees after the ceasefire. According to Madame von der Leyen, this work is underway and is going, and that's a quote, really successfully. Well, that is quite evident, apparently, based on the number of human losses incurred by Ukraine. European Commission is really overperforming. Madame von der Leyen also added that they are to study and analyze new potential sources for financing of the Ukrainian armed forces, and she kept emphasizing that the first defense line is the defense and a big army for Ukraine, and the second one is a multinational group of the coalition of the willing with the support of the Americans. So initially it was one kind of a steel porcupine, now we're about to have two apparently. Well, obviously, Madame von der Leyen got carried away with her fantasies, and the Minister of Defense of Germany, Boris Pistorius, jumped in to stop her there, stating that the European Union has no competences whatsoever to allocate troops or take decision on allocation of troops of any of the EU member countries, irrespectively of their purpose. He was clearly irritated by that kind of narrative, and he kept emphasizing that that kind of matters cannot be discussed until the parties of the conflict are seated at the negotiation table. I'd like to further ponder on this revelation, and I'd like to reiterate that Russia has no objective whatsoever to negotiate any kind of a framework that could facilitate foreign intervention in Ukraine in any kind of a format. Well, we do need to convey it to our counterparts so that the next time they're willing to consider this matter, they could get very clear hints regarding the position of Russia. Well, they obviously consider themselves the hegemon of the neo-colonial world order. They keep inciting the war and obviously treat Ukraine as a testing facility for their new military hardware and equipment. And in this context, I'd like to pay attention to the statement made by the professor of organic chemistry at the Cornell University, Dave Collum. That's the statement he made in an interview to Tucker Carlson on August 27th. In this particular interview, Professor mentioned 36 US laboratories in Ukraine used to manufacture biological weapon and test this biological weapon on civilians. And once again, that is the statement made by the professor of organic chemistry from the Cornell University. Testing of biological weapons on humans. And so far, I haven't had the license being revoked from this very professor. He was never fired from the university, and he openly stated that Ukraine is perfectly suitable for that kind of testing, thanks to developed infrastructure and extremely vulnerable population that could be used for testing. Well, that's quite a statement, don't you think? I've also noticed that the Western grants and financing is used by some media who claim to be mainstream media, but actually act as propaganda, calling it fake. Well, sorry, but I just quoted professor of the Cornell University. If there are any claims, if there is a desire to name someone who is spreading lies, well, here he is. This is Professor Dave Collum. This is Cornell University in the United States. You can check his diploma, his education, all issued in the United States, so any kind of claims or concerns should be applied there. We are allowed to quote. We do that openly and great precision and accuracy. So I'm therefore not ready to accept any claims on this particular matter. Now, a few more words on the Kiev regime. We see a lot of illustrations to its throwing fits of rage, but one of the most representative ones is the way and desire they are willing to destroy the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. On August 27th, the so-called State Service on Ethnic Policy and the Freedom of Conscience of Ukraine conducted the so-called expert opinions and have made a decision to recognize the Kiev metropoly of the canonic Ukrainian Orthodox Church to be affiliated with a foreign religious organization, being the Russian Orthodox Church, and the activities of the Russian Orthodox Church are banned in Ukraine. I have just one single question to this state agency of Ukraine, state agency on the freedom of conscience. I'm just wondering, what is the nationality of your god? What is the passport that the god has in Ukraine? I guess that would require a separate legal opinion. I'm sure they would succeed in determining that, and then they would be able to clearly state that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is affiliated with, and then move around this idea further. You may think that this is pure sarcasm, but this is exactly what Ukraine is doing right now, and they are doing that within the framework of the law adopted in 2024, and this is a law on protection of constitution in the area of operations of religious organizations. And the single purpose of this law is to eliminate Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And in its title, this very law declares protection of constitution. But I'm quite certain that the Ukrainian constitution guarantees freedom of religion. And here I would only quote Bulgakov, and they also tend to persecute Bulgakov in Ukraine. On September the 2nd, it became known to us that Ukrainian State Service on Ethnic Policy and the Freedom of Conscience, that's apparently a new cleansing authority, sued the idea of recognizing the Kiev metropolis as the managing center of Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Well, this state authority is truly acting as a new inquisition. This is religious cleansing that we're witnessing live in Ukraine right now. And they are aiming to deprive Orthodox Church of its property, and that was the property offered to that on rental terms. And that would apply to the absolute majority of churches and cathedrals. So this very state service on ethnic policy and the freedom of conscience has already notified 154 religious organizations that are part of or are somehow related to the Kiev metropolis on the upcoming ban. Clearly, they are aiming to behead this largest religious confession in Ukraine. Kiev regime is determined to do that. And afterwards, it would only be a matter of time once they pursue the remaining parishes. But I'd like to raise a different question. We clearly see that once Kiev regime decided to fully eliminate the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, we see that the churches, the Orthodox churches, are now empty, and some call them breakaway priests. And there are people who keep watching how that kind of cleansing is happening to the church. And who are those people? They are openly applauding to the awful prosecution and torture of their brothers in religion. There may be some claims or disagreements on the ritual side of religion, but they cannot promote hatred, especially towards those people that they consider to be their brothers sharing the same parish. Obviously, the Orthodox Church are no longer visited by worshippers. They're getting empty, and we see that from the live footage in Ukraine. And once all those churches are taken away from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, what is there to be left? What is going to happen to those buildings, to those cathedrals? Well, I can tell you what is going to happen. They would do anything to those spaces. They can easily turn cathedrals into saunas or shopping malls, hotels, tourist centers. Have we experienced that in our history before? Yes, we have. In the latest history, in the 20th century, we've experienced that in the Russian history, and we believe that this is the part of history to be ashamed of. And surprisingly enough, this is exactly the part of our history that Kiev regime is claiming to combat, talking about communization, and so on and so forth. But somehow they are doing exactly those acts that they are claiming to combat and fight against. Well, the only thing that the Kiev regime is actually doing is trying to eliminate and cancel all the good things that happened during that time. Those are monuments to the heroes of the Second World War, the Great Patriotic War, the great writers who've been tested by time, beloved by everyone. They lived through the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, and the democratic times, and are still remembered and loved today. We live in the surprising times. Well, if you would think that this is sarcasm too, no. I will tell you this is the experience that I witness in many Western European countries and also in the United States of America. I worked in Manhattan, in New York, and I would regularly go through the western part of Manhattan, bypassing the cathedral that was turned into a nightclub. You would see dancing taking place with all the neon lights, with all the attributes of this kind of a nightlife. Nobody was surprised by that. Now it even hurts me to remember that. I do not know what is happening to this cathedral right now, whether that is still a nightclub, but it is definitely no longer used as a cathedral. But back then, I clearly remember that all the attributes of a typical nightclub are well represented in this very place that once used to be a cathedral. So you would go there and you would see everything that you're likely to see in a nightclub, including strip dancing. And the same could happen to former Orthodox churches in Ukraine. In the best case scenario, they could be turned and transferred into museums if they would resist the temptation not to embezzle this property and money, but at least turn them into a museum or in something that could serve educational or tourist purposes. Otherwise, that would be the most horrendous transformation of sacred religious places into shopping venues and facilities. And that would be exactly the opposite of what the Orthodox Christianity and Christianity as a whole is promoting as an absolute value. So that would be a grave offense to the millions of Orthodox Christians, and the Special Commission of the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine started its work starting from August 28th of this year, doing their work in the Kiev and Lavra, the cave monastery, and they are doing so-called stocktaking in the caves. What does that apply to? To all the sacred items and relics that are stored in the caves. And again, we can recall the history that was happening in Russia about 100 years ago in the Soviet Union, when all the relics, all the sacred remnants were disfigured and removed. And Zelensky and his regime claim that this is something that Ukraine wanted to step away from, to eliminate the past of communism. But this is exactly where Ukraine is heading to. It wasn't happening for the last decade, but now Ukraine is back there. On the 19th of August, the worshippers got to witness this so-called stocktaking process, and they would see the relics of their saints being taken away from cathedrals and churches, and would simply keep storing them in a regular warehouse somewhere in the basement. Well, it feels like something very similar just lately was happening in the Soviet times, and we seemed to express our sorrow that there was so much literature published on the matter, so many materials, so many conferences, so many roundtables, and we've been throwing ashes to our heads for so long. And this fact is truly, truly troubling and has already caused acute criticism from the public, from the broader Orthodox public. But this single fact is causing concern. But there are so many acts of the Kiev regime adjacent to that that include shelling of the civilian infrastructure, killing children, and humiliating the residents of the Kursk region, just like the Nazi Germans used to do that. why then all other churches were keeping quiet on this matter? Is that politics? No, it's just the actual loss of all that is typical of a humanity. This is unhumanizing of Ukraine. And the so-called head of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine visited the Lavra caves and conducted a kind of attempt of a holy liturgy in an attempt to legitimize the completely illegitimate process of removal of all the sacred items from the Orthodox Church and the Lavra. It's also noteworthy to say that the current museum and its head, Madame Kotlerovskaya, complained that once the caves in the Kiev Lavra were closed, what do you think would be happening to those? They've noticed that the number of visitors to the Lavra dropped dramatically. Well, I'm not surprised. I guess people are just afraid to go there. Just imagine that is the kind of vandalism that they are committing in the graveyard, in the cemetery. Who would go there to watch it? Nobody would. Only the investigating committee should go and take a look how they are opening up and dishonoring graves. And Svetlana Kotlerevskaya, who is now in charge of the Lavra, the state official, shared her plans to allow more visitors once they push away all the monks from the monastery. And how exactly do they aim to do that? In the lower part of the Lavra, they want to create all the necessary components of the infrastructure management. That's a direct quote, including some facilities where you can enjoy a cup of coffee, eat an ice cream and buy some souvenirs.
Oh my God. You see that this is sheer madness if you can offer this. And at the same time, we see that we have a great concern. So these people, they would like to make money on these holy graves. And can you imagine, she also offered to remove some frescoes from the Lavra churches and to substitute them with more Ukrainian paintings. And according to her, this is all will be done as part of a de-Russification of the church. We have seen it already, and we have seen that in these churches and monastery facilities, some culinary shows are organized during the Lent season, and they make all that tasty food inappropriate for the Orthodox Lent. And what else can be said? Well, probably they should turn it into a hotel where all those remnants of the saints were kept. And you know, there are some fiction books where we could read about it, but really this is something about losing everything humane, and this is something from the Dostoevsky books, from Karamazov brothers and others. We are going to observe everything that is happening there in these areas, and we are going to investigate all the crimes against the Orthodox Church and all worshippers and priests. But what is most important, it is not the walls of those churches. And it is not only the people who are suffering. I am absolutely sure that real worshippers, real Orthodox worshippers, they will survive all that. But, you know, the blow is against the worship. And we see that the faith is distorted. And they are claiming that some quasi-empty faith is what they need. It is some religious similarity And of course, the Foreign Affairs Ministry is going to collect all the data and all the cases of discrimination and freedom, limitations and restrictions. And we are going to do that with the international community. And we are going to do it because this will be the chronicles of our times. And this will be scrutinized by future generations. And they should know the truth, how all this was happening. And in future, we are going to publish detailed reports on human rights violation in Ukraine. And all these facts, they confirm that denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine is a must. And as the government of Russia stated many times, this is what we are going to do. Right, and speaking about the Bucha provocation, it was a staged massacre, a killing, and it was covered by all Western media. It is already 3 years since that time, and I hope you remember that at that time this unbelievable story was cooked, and we exposed the authors of this provocation many times. And we demonstrated that all those charges were falsified. And I remember by the minute how we were trying to understand what was happening, because it was so absurd, it was so wild and unimaginable, and really it was some parallel reality. But it was happening in the real world. And we were living through it, and none of the stated facts existed in reality. And we were reading the Western media, and we couldn't believe our eyes. We couldn't refute all that. And can you imagine if something like that was told about you in some media? So falsified lies published, and millions of people were reading it, and we couldn't even understand how we can explain. But what can you explain if you haven't done it? And in this case, something different was needed. And if it was about you, then you would be a victim of these dangerous falsified lies. The Russian law enforcement agencies initiated an investigation in order to understand what really was happening. And, of course, the Zelensky's regime was not going to reveal their crimes. We addressed many times to the High Commissioner of the United Nations for Human Rights, Volker Turk, and we requested to obtain additional data for this investigation. And in September of 2024, the Permanent Ministry of Russia in New York sent a report prepared by the investigative committee. In the Secretariat of the United Nations, they were trying to ignore this request and this report, and I know that some of the members of the Secretariat unofficially were addressing us, and they were saying off record, we do understand that all this hasn't happened, and the Kiev regime is providing false information. So they were saying, yes, we do understand it, and that is why there are no public announcements and comments on that. So at first, they did join the voices of the media, but later when they realized that it had been falsified, they just stopped commenting it, but they did nothing in order to reveal all these lies. And despite our numerous remindings, our request just stayed there somewhere on the shelf. So they were just pro forma letters we were receiving, and we didn't have any substantiated response. Only in July this year, so in September 2024, we sent that request, and in July this year, so it is approximately 1 year later, the permanent mission of Russia in New York received a response, although it was just a paper with no details, no arguments. And they were saying that the High Commission for Human Rights analyzed our request and took a decision that the corresponding data and information, and now what do you think? What is the ending of this phrase? That these data and information cannot be revealed. And why is that? And they explained because it would be a violation of the obligation to keep this information confidential for third parties, or otherwise it would cause some threat. And in this paradigm, we can think about, I don't know, some private data, personal information and all that. No, here they're speaking that it might cause a threat to the security of the United Nations activity. Can you imagine? The United Nations has the Security Council that is promoting security all over the world, and this response letter included, after we submitted our request, this letter explained that they cannot provide this information because it might put the security of the UN activities in danger. Well, of course, all this is nothing new, and such explanations were used by Volker Turk in the past in Geneva, and in this High Commissioner's letters he was referring to some structures like the Independent International Commission for Inquiry on Ukraine and others, and they were formulating it like the crime of the Russian military troops against Ukraine. And, when they are saying something against our country, then they provide all the reference links and some sources and lots of information. But in this case, they just indirectly refer to them, but they do not provide this information to us. So when we request for this information, they say, no, we cannot do it because it is not safe. And it seems that the Secretariat of the United Nations does this intentionally, so they do not cooperate with governmental bodies, and they do not ensure justice. And of course we are going to do something with it. And we sent to the Secretary General of the United Nations a letter, and we requested to explain why it takes so long to provide an answer. And we said that we do not understand this confidentiality agreement with third party, and we reminded about the UN obligations to work with nations for the purposes of justice. And we tried to publish this request as an official document of the General Assembly and the Security Council. So we would like to remind that we are not going to stop this work, and we will make sure that the United Nations specialists stop using such a non-constructive line of work. And we know that this Bucha provocation aimed at damaging the negotiation process. That was the main goal, and they were trying to demonize Russia, and for this they always find strength and resources, and this provocation was needed in order to explain to the world community why the Kiev regime is stepping out of the negotiations in the spring of 2022. And later it turned out that they had done that not because of these falsified aggressive attacks, but because Boris Johnson visited them and he promised them something, that the other states would help them. And it will be not only those Western states, but the whole universe. And after that, they stopped negotiating, and they needed some visuals for the Western media. So they needed this plot, this story, this narrative. And they followed this line of thought, and it was similar to provocations of the Nazi regime during the Second World War. And in the textual version of this briefing, we are going to provide all the details and all this information. And we insist that the investigation and inquiry should be held, and all the people behind it should be taken responsible. This is a real crime. And now, turning to Moldova, the parliamentary elections will take place on the 28th of September. And now we see that the intensive work is aiming not the preparation to these elections, but it is anti-Russia rhetoric. And on the 26th of August, we heard another portion of ungrounded and unjustified Russophobic statements, and they were saying that Russia is even holding some cyber attacks and bribes people in Moldova. And we are asking why Moldovan people, because they were saying that only Romanians are living there. And Sandu, the president of Moldova, is receiving money and bonuses from Western states. And the show believes that all this that Russia is allegedly doing is done in order to bring them to the side from the European democratic processes. And the Moldovan experts reminded the situation in the previous periods. And, you know, Moldova first joined Romania, and then, only then, they may join the European Union. But Bob Shoy didn't mention this. And the Moldovan experts reminded about that truth about the occupation in the periods of 1918, 1940, and 1941-44. And we also can remind this. Those were black days of the Moldovan history. And the Sandu's regime are now referring to it as the liberation of the territory, but it was mass terror and elimination of the population. And Bessarabia, that area, it was robbed and oppressed, and during 22 years of occupation, the death rate was at the top in Europe, and about 500,000 people left this territory, and almost 200,000 died of hunger. Lots of people were executed, and the Romanian historians, one of them is Nicolae Iorga, and I'm quoting, he was saying that even 10% of the population were not having appropriate feelings towards the Romanians. And this policy of terror and robbery, this is what was observed after the Second World War, and there were ethnic cleansing, and there were ghettos and concentration camps, and during 3 years of the Romanian occupation, almost 350,000 Jews were killed, and that was about 90% of this national population there. So we shouldn't forget this. We, a multi-nation country, we are supporting real values, and we are not going to refer only to some fragments of the history. All the facts have been registered. And we have heard so much about the Holocaust from the representatives of the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they did so much to commemorate this memory. But the Holocaust is not just a word. This is people, and people who were executed and were killed. And now we see that this is the memory these Moldovan authorities are having. And those people, they were not only executing the population, but they also eliminating and damaging agriculture, production facilities. There was famish there. And now the experts are saying that Moldova is facing the most dangerous threat, and they are going to lose their institutional independence. And the Moldovan language is now renamed the Romanian language. This is like, science fiction, and no philosopher who is writing about some dystopias could imagine this. Now, these people are told that they are speaking a different language. Okay, so they are renaming the language the people have spoken all their lives. But this language does exist. And there's also the practice of appointing Romanian citizens, those who come from Romania, and we know that the government of Moldova is affiliated to Romania, and we see there are serious violations of human rights and international law, and peaceful demonstrations are violently dispersed. And we see that all the people they are grouped as those who are loyal to the regime and those who are not. And we know that for Russian or pro-Russian citizens, there will be only 2 voting units there. And of course, it is not enough for the full democratic process. And what about numbers? You can think, and I'm referring not just to you, journalists, because you cover this regularly. I'm speaking about the wider audience. People may say, okay, just 2 voting centers, all right. People may travel there. Maybe they should get up early in the morning. Oh, well, not very convenient, but it is fine. Well, of course, yeah, it is possible to cope with it. And the citizens of Moldova, last time, I think they spent hours in those lines, but the problem is quite different. The problem is that in each of such centers, according to the Moldovan legislation, only 5,000 ballots are provided. So if 25,000 people are standing in the line, only 5,000 of them can vote. So it is not enough for the whole Russian population or Moldovans who live now in Russia. So can you imagine that the Sandu government has no paper for publishing those ballots? No. So this is only problematic for Russia, because for Moldovans living in other countries, there's no problem like that. So there, the situation is quite opposite, and there will be more places where they can vote, and there will be even more ballots that is required. And those who are claiming that Russia is an alleged threat to Moldova, no, it is just the opposite. We have been always protecting, we have always been friendly with the Moldovan people, and they keep this in mind, they remember. Yeah. And there are plans to disseminate all this population and dissolve the Moldovan state. And now they have nothing in common. And right now, the European values, they should follow the European values, because otherwise they wouldn't be called part of Europe. And the experts say that there's no clear understanding what will be the outcome of the election in Moldova.
We paid attention to the annual report on military spendings of the NATO published by the UN Secretariat. According to the statistics, the Westerners steadily continue to militarize their economies and take all the possible measures to implement the agreements reached at the Hague summit on the comprehensive scheme to reflect respective expenditures, core, 3.5% of GDP, and related, 1.5% of GDP. The Secretariat guarantees that all NATO countries, but Iceland, that doesn't have the military, will reach the 2% of GDP in terms of military spending. The document suggests that in 2025, the alliance members altogether will spend about $1.6 trillion for defense spending. This is much more than all other countries of the world put together. And this number keeps rising year by year. The U.S. alone planned to spend some $980 billion, and the rest, 600+ billion, for Europe and Canada. It's obvious that neo-colonialist ambition of the Western elites is something that underlines the irresponsible militarization of NATO. It is a major threat to the global security and also infringes upon the interests of the populations of the member countries. The ungrounded growth of military spending is achieved at the expense of socioeconomic interests, and the alliance has turned into an instrument of aggressive policy, and the NATO leadership is trying to ensure its domination at any cost, even to the detriment of the well-being of the citizens. And with the advent of the fall, the NATO camp demonstrates an aggravation in terms of the military activity near the Russian borders. And such developments are not only seasonal, but they require more detailed analysis against the backdrop of aggressive militarization in the EU countries. And this is also fed by feats of impotent anti-Russian hatred, together with a paranoid fear, something along the lines of the Russians are coming. And as is always the case, the Baltic states are trying to become the best performers. And they are trying to make full use of this good, so to speak. And we monitor closely the NIMS 2024 military exercises held in Lithuania between September 2nd and October the 8th. As any other military activity of the NATO on the eastern flank, we see that the gradual number of the military participating in such exercises is growing, and currently it's about 15,000 service people. According to our estimates, this is a mistaking and destructive line of the North Atlantic Alliance. And they live according to the principle, if a fall is a pleasure, well, then it's a flight. You know, the NATO has no real reasons to bolster up its military infrastructure near our borders. The Kiev regime was saying for years that they were fighting Russia, and they did the same in the Baltic states, and they read what they publish in their papers, and they tend to believe it, but you got to get closer to reality. And naturally, NATO regularly gets into the pockets of their taxpayers, getting them ready to pull the belts. On many occasions, we mentioned that we have no intention to attack the NATO countries. The Russian president, the leadership mentioned this on many occasions, and that was a message presented in many of our interventions. However, the European leaders don't tend to notice this on purpose. They intimidate their citizens. They threaten them with imminent war with Russia. Now they have to be held responsible for their words because they are those who want that war. And I think they have to say that the militarization is something that they're doing with the same purpose. Well, unfortunately, we shouldn't hope that the line of thinking of the Western elites would change. We would continue to analyze the military activity of our neighbors, including the military exercises that bring up the risks of military escalation. We will take into account the threats to our national security when building our responses. The Korean Peninsula, between 18th and 28th of August, in the south of the Korean Peninsula, the United States and the Republic of Korea held a joint military exercises, Ilji Freedom Shield 2025. Despite formal statements of the organizers of these gaming, it's possible to call them defensive because several dozens of thousands of the service people and American F-15 jets and other offensive assets were present there. Now, the exercises were multilateral because the UK and the so-called UN command were part of the exercises. Such steps definitely are not aligned with the desire declared by the Washington and Seoul to diffuse the military and political tension. And in fact, they defeat the statements of U.S. and the Korean representatives on their desire to establish a dialogue with the DPRK and respect its form of government. How to establish a dialogue with those who are against such a development? That's absurd. Now, when we see that the sanctions and military pressure on Pyongyang were on the rise, it's impossible to speak of any prospects for turning the tide in this sub-region, but rather about new provocation. Now, we've got a lot of questions on the eve of the briefing and prior to that on the situation with the Russian pensions to compatriot in Latvia and Estonia and how we settled the situation. We did mention that we did whatever we could to address the situation. We would share the information, and the time has come to do that. We will explain not only what we do, but we will tell about the outcomes. Thanks to persistent efforts on the part of the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Social Fund of Russia, we've settled the situation with the pension payments delays. Altogether, more than 15 million euros have been transferred to the respective authorities of Latvia and Estonia, and the money will come to the citizens' accounts very soon, between 8th and 14th September in Estonia and between the 8th and 21st September in Latvia. We're talking about 13,000 of retirees, and I wanted to emphasize that the blame for this artificial crisis in 2025 the blame should be fully laid on the Western community and its financial institutions for the block the transfers from Gazprom Bank that is subject to politically motivated and illegitimate sanctions supported by the Baltic states authorities. And our compatriots are fully aware of this. And they were trying to persevere. They were waiting. They asked questions, but they did realize who created all those challenges for them. The Russian party, in bona fide and in full performs its commitments under the bilateral agreements with Latvia and Estonia on cooperation in social security and pension. The attempts to lay the blame on us, on the Russian Federation, have nothing to do with the real situation and are immoral. The Russian side has done everything in order to successfully resolve the situation, and our compatriots were held hostage. Thousands of our citizens were unable to receive Russian pensions for months. Oh, and the other important thing, I think you followed the hysteria in the Western media with respect to Madame von der Leyen aircraft. Allegedly, somebody jammed the GPS signal for a plane, and the pilot had to use paper maps to land. I want to emphasize this. I don't know what kind of aircraft Madame von der Leyen is using so that the plane has to use paper maps, but I want to have a look at those maps. I wonder if they could publish those maps. As I said, I want to have a look at those maps that I used to land the plane, and how Bulgaria is shown there, what color is used to identify the country. You know, this is kind of daily fake-making machine that we observe in the Western press. They keep creating fake news without any delay, without any break. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of memes and funny stories about this. Share these with us. We'll publish them. For this is truly preposterous. It's not just paranoia. This is very cynical calculation. They need to divert the attention of their populations from the worsening economic situation in the EU. They have to divert their attention from the real culprits of the crises suffered by the European countries. And it is the political elites in the EU that are to be blamed for that. The elites that follow the idea of their own enrichments at the expense of well-being of the current EU citizens and future EU generations. They keep feeding the insatiable hydra in Kiev in an attempt to ensure a strategic defeat of Russia. The most recent accounts of von der Leyen's plane using paper maps to land is, a sign of despair. The Western media came up with another sensation. They stated that Madame von der Leyen's plane had to be landed in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, using paper maps due to a loss of a GPS signal. The loss of a signal was considered as a hybrid attack of the Kremlin. Well, I can just imagine that somebody sitting in the Kremlin is using a joystick and switching off the GPS signal for von der Leyen's plane. Let them use paper planes. Well, how come they never stole the maps? This might have been easier. And allegedly, that was a move made directly against Madame von der Leyen. And as the official spokesperson of the Euro Commission stated during the visit, the chairperson saw her and experienced daily challenges and threats on the part of Russia and its proxies. Are there any facts? Well, if Madame von der Leyen wants to see some challenges, let her, walk out to the streets of EU cities. Let her visit cafes, restaurants, plants. Let her visit the farmers, industrialists, merchants in the EU countries, those whom she personally made bankrupt, those whom she personally made stop their businesses. Let her visit the healthcare facilities that she provided with vaccines on paper, and later she destroyed those vaccines. You would recall how she procured those vaccines from the U.S. Manufacturers without following any procedure established in the EU or the European Commission. The vaccines worth billions of dollars. I'm talking about anti-COVID vaccines, but nobody saw those vaccines. Those are the challenges that she is supposed to get familiarized with and look at them and face them, if you will. Well, I'm talking about the challenges face. Oh, what are there any facts? No. And not just we didn't receive the facts, but the communities in the EU countries failed to obtain any facts. No entity was able to come up with some technical details on that. Yet, that was not a barrier for the European press to quote this. Well, that was a lie from the very outset, and that was obvious for any individual who studied physics or geography at school, apart from the adepts of the 360-degree turn. Even if some part of this fantasy were true, I wonder if they managed to find and locate the EU on the paper map to say nothing about Bulgaria. Now let's try to understand what happened in reality. The key global service, the Flight Radar 24, dispelled the innuendos. It was emphasized that GPS signal from takeoff to landing was good. Okay, they don't believe us. What about Flight Radar? It's not our asset. Although, I don't know, maybe the way they see it, it's something that we now control. But let them dwell on this. Now, according to the service, the flight of the European Commission had was to last 1 hour and 48 minutes, but it lasted 1 hour 57 minutes, only 9 minutes longer than initially planned. Those who are frequent flyers would know that this is normal kind of difference. The navigation system had no failures, and the navigation information indicator was pretty high throughout the flight, and all the navigation data were transmitted perfectly, and GPS was fully operational. Once again, this is something coming from Flight Radar. Now, what we heard from the Western media and what we heard from Ursula von der Leyen is not just a lie, as pretty often happens when there is some half-truth is spoken. No, this is 100% fake.
Obviously, we had to react to this outrageous example of fake news, and detailed investigation on this matter was issued by International Fact-Checking Network. They analyzed every single detail, and they double-checked and showed that even the landing route for the plane of Madame von der Leyen was fully adequate and typical for this very airport. I encourage every one of you to take a look at this report. The link will be available in the briefing document. I don't know, maybe it was something broken with Madame von der Leyen and not her plane. I don't know, really. I can't even imagine that it's just a coincidence that this outrageous bit of fake news was happening at the background of a very successful meeting of the heads of states of the SCO member countries in Tanzi, bringing together more than half of population of the earth. I'm sure that that kind of provocation was intentionally done to distract everyone from this glorious assembly. We've just talked about Bucha provocation. That one was played out with the blood on the hands of the Kiev regime and its curators. Well, that one would suffice with involvement of Madame von der Leyen alone. Their own losses, and in particular someone else's success stories, cause neurotic response from the West, and every single attempt to attract public opinion to their own personas. And from here we see those blatant lies presented as some kind of revelation and imposed to European people. And by that I mean not just Ursula von der Leyen, but also some outrageous stories produced by Kaja Kallas lately. And I quote, Madam Kallas assumes that the meetings of the head of states of Russia, China and North Korea, as if there were no other meetings of head of states happening in China, why not mention other heads of states present in this very meeting? And yet again, this is a clear illustration to this neo-colonial thinking, pseudo-greatness of the former empires that the West demonstrates openly towards the global majority. So, Madam Kallas assumes that the meetings of the heads of states of Russia, China and North Korea are a direct challenge to the current world order. So, whenever there are NATO summits or summits of the EU leaders or any kind of the Rammstein formula meetings, pseudo-peace negotiations or meetings of the Coalition of the Willing or G7, that should be okay. They believe this is exactly how it should be. However, whenever there are some other heads of states meeting with a peaceful, I would even say truly historic agenda coming up to commemorate the greatest victory of the humankind against the evil in the 20th century, meet together and make peace-aimed statements to favor friendship, prosperity, cooperation and global peace, well, they call it challenge to the West. And in this particular aspect, Madam Kallas is not that far away from the truth, because they indeed treat it as a challenge to themselves. It is not a challenge thrown by those organizing those meetings and participating in them, but inside the European Union they have shaped a reality of their own that makes them perceive any stepping away or objection to be obedient to what they want as an actual threat, as an actual challenge. If we are talking about the world order based on the rules that are different for everyone, or the world order based on lies and fake news, then indeed I could agree with Madam Kallas. That kind of meetings definitely do not fit in this outrageous reality prepared by the Western community for the rest of the humankind. We define our formats, we define our meetings, we define our agenda. There is only just one nuance. We do not impose our agenda on the world minority. The meetings we organize are open to everyone willing to participate. They are fully voluntarily. We are not forcing anyone. Those meetings are not consequence of dictatorships. Those meetings are open. They have very clear agenda. They are not aggressive in their nature. However, that is exactly what is treated by the Western minority as a challenge. If we are to talk about the resistance of the world majority, and as you understand, the SCO meeting demonstrated the unity of the world majority in a certain low cut, definitely in terms of the population of the countries, the scale of the economies. Well, if there is any kind of resistance there, then it is the only resistance to the Western web of lies that they created, and I keep repeating that today. One more topic to touch on. We addressed this issue at the previous briefing. We promised we would get to that again, and here it goes. A few answers to the questions we received on the 35 years of the so-called German unity. As you may know, the anniversary was celebrated just lately, although it didn't get much attention in Germany itself. It wasn't a story of success and glory, although it was worth mentioning the glorious past. However, this anniversary was defined by yet another statement of threats posed by Russia, and the worst traditions of modern European political correctness. It's no coincidence that they are keeping quiet on yet another memorable date. And if we are to compare the scale of the informational campaign conducted back then, it was quite dire. It looks like everything was done in order to minimize the presence of this important anniversary in the informational field. And I do believe it was quite a powerful date. 35 years to the signing of the Treaty Unity, the reunition of Eastern and West Germany. Formally, it came into force on October the 3rd, 35 years ago. But look, there was so much screaming and complaining that the nation was split. Why exactly the nation was split? Who did that? And what were the reasons for that? Because that was the country that was the source of threats to global security in the 20th century, and the world had to consolidate every effort in order to neutralize those threats. But how come for decades Germany has been telling everyone how they suffer while divided, and then the anniversary of reunification goes unnoticed. It's not that Germany tried to save some money, the character trait traditionally associated with Germany and some other leaders in the West. I believe the reason is different. This anniversary gives a lot of food for thought, for some serious thinking, and indeed, this anniversary was not given enough attention. Just to remind you, who is responsible for the division of Germany after the Second World War? If we are not to study history based on the publication of the Bild newspaper or Hollywood blockbusters, if we are to look into the actual historic documents of the time, we would see clearly that the only country that clearly resisted to the division of the Soviet Union every single step of the way was the Soviet Union, and only once the so-called Western allies and the partners of the modern-day Germany, de facto and de jure, the German Democratic Republic was established. And again, it was our country who opted 40 years later for unification, reunification of the German people, again opposing the position of London and Paris. As far as I remember, Washington was against it as well. And no matter how long we talk about the German Revolution, People's Revolution as the main trigger for reunification, I'm not willing to downplay the importance of the public uprising back then, but still everyone agrees that no Germany would ever exist today, no Germany would ever be reunited without Moscow. However, Germany was not able to appreciate this truly historic gift. Why are they keeping quiet about this anniversary? Well, they don't have much to be proud of. Look, what is the outcome of this reunification? Over the past 35 years, Germany remains a deeply divided country, and its population is split between the citizens of the first and second class. There is no actual reunification happening for Germans themselves. Indeed, there is a separate body and a state agency and a state official responsible for the matters of reunification. However, there is no proper constitution of the reunited Germany, although Article 146 of the Key Guardian Act of the Federal German Republic states that it would cease to exist in the moment when the constitution to be adopted with a free expression of will by the German people comes into force. However, we've never seen this expression of free will by the German people. No constitution was adopted. They never got it. Germany loves to interfere into the affairs of the other countries. They enjoy lecturing the freedom of speech and values of democracy to everyone else, but not themselves. It looks like they particularly enjoy lecturing everyone. So I'd love to ask Germany a question. Why not deliver of what the main law of your country states? This is where you should start. As soon as you deliver on that, and this is actually the cornerstone for German statehood, for the German democracy, for rights and freedoms of humanity. you first and foremost need to deliver on what you promised to deliver to German people, and then you may lecture others if you succeed in delivering this task. So far, we do not see any outcomes, and we do not even see any attempts to pursue those goals. So Germany does have a constitutional court. There is an agency responsible for protection of the constitution, and this is the agency constantly looking for everyone thinking differently. However, there is still no constitution. And at the same time, they are rigorously focusing on shaping the future of modern-day Ukraine. I believe the explanation is simple, whether they liked it or not, but back then the leaders of West Germany have chosen the way of occupation. Yet another Anschluss took place. There was another wave of repressions and massive layoffs happened in eastern lands. Thousands and hundreds of people lost their jobs, were deprived of their property, awards and pension fees, despite the fact that the government of the modern-day Germany is still paying pension and retirement fees to former Nazis. Well, this is outrageous. Just several months ago, I was given an interview to a German journalist, and he asked me a question. When will Russia help the German society awaken? And my answer was that once we did awaken Germany, 80 years ago exactly, we helped Germany wake up from this Nazi nightmare. Well, for the second time, Germany needs to wake up on its own. Because what I'm saying right now is outrageous, and just, if we are to look at the current political establishment of Germany, again, I'm not saying anything that would be a conclusion of my own. I only make references to facts and publicly available documents. And if there is any kind of public person, political official or media is to say the same, they would be immediately cancelled and marginalized, with all the consequences that we have seen repeatedly before. The unification chancellor, as people call Helmut Kohl in Germany, the promise of prosperity to East Germany never happened, never became reality. But that wouldn't be a problem, not that much of a problem. The country could still be aiming for greater prosperity. But the important news is that Germany finds enough financing and attention for Ukraine, despite the fact they haven't had any success over the last 35 years in an attempt to reunite their own country. And they are bold enough to lecture Ukraine and give advice on how to develop their own statehood, democracy, and pave the way to prosperity. A whole number of enterprises and industrial companies in former East Germany were destroyed. Privatization never impacted Eastern Germans. Even their own apartments never became their property officially. There are plenty of villages that people had to flee. Young people are living permanently because they have no jobs to find. It's only the retired people living their last days who've sacrificed their lives and labor to the so-called totalitarian regimes. And still, the former East Germany is being demonized as a totalitarian post-Soviet space, as if people living in East Germany were not even Germans. And even today, they're wearing labels of criminals or collaborators. And even those Eastern Germans that were born many years and decades later, even today they do not properly feel as full-fledged citizens of their own country. Even official statistics shows that. There is a report called On the State of German Unity for 2024, openly states that those born from Eastern lands only account for a tiny share of CEOs and leaders at various levels. Is that democracy? Is democracy supposed to function in this manner? And this is the kind of experience that Germany tried to impose on Ukraine. This is segregation of people, of their own people inside their own country. Well, if Germany did manage to share some best practices with Ukraine, that was this one. And all of that is highlighted by the in the open letter by the last president of Eastern Germany, Peter Michael Distel. I could hardly call him a friend of Russia or even a friend of Germany, but in an open letter to Frank-Walter Steinmeier, he is screaming out loud about those outrageous facts. And it's not surprising that the voters of Germany today prefer the Alternative for Germany party, and many say that it's due to the Russian actions. They call this party extremist by signing up millions of Germans from former Eastern Germany and declaring them extremist as well. Well, that's so easy. You label them as extremist and there is no more problem of the Eastern lands of Germany. And I'd like to finish this bit with a quote that was published in a book dedicated to the 35th anniversary of reunification of Germany. It was written by former Prime Minister of Thuringia, Bodo Ramalova, and a historian named Ilka Sasha Kovalchuk. The book is called The New Wall, Conversations About the Eastern Germany. In this book, it's openly acknowledged that the majority of the Western Germans cannot even imagine the depth of hatred that is felt towards them and the Western system in the east of their own country. Well, this is the kind of reunification that we're able to see 35 years after the treaty was signed. It could have been their internal affair unless they would be trying to lecture other countries. And Russia was and is being lectured repeatedly by Germany and the West on the values of democracy, how we must structure it and promote democratic values. Well, thank you. I guess we can do without your advice. On the 2nd of September 1944, and the square of Badin in Hanoi, the leader of liberation movement, Ho Chi Minh, read openly the Declaration of Independence and declared the independence of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. The Soviet Union was one of the first to establish diplomatic ties with the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. That was on the 30th of January 1950. That was an important role it played politically and economically to support the young republic. This year we're celebrating the 80th anniversary of establishment of independence, and we send congratulations from the President, the Chairman of the Government, both chambers of the Russian Parliament, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. The celebratory events will take place in the capital of Vietnam, and the Russian delegation will be present, headed by the first Deputy Chairman of the Federation Council of the Federal Assembly, the Secretary of the General Union of the United Russia Party, Mr. Yakoshev, and we are also happy to say that the Russian Honorary Guard will also participate in the parade. We generally congratulate our Vietnamese friend on this important date, and we hope for continuation of partnership and the true nature of friendship.
And on the 4th of September marks the establishment of diplomatic relations with Libya. This is today, actually. Our ties have had a long history, and with the assistance of the Soviet Union and Russian Federation in Libya, a number of infrastructure facilities, first of all in oil and gas sector, were constructed, and very many citizens of Libya studied at universities in Russia. Now Libya is going through quite difficult times. We have been supporting their striving for independence and territorial unity. We are absolutely sure that the people of Libya will be able to overcome all the difficulties and will establish well-functioning institutions of governance and establish the right passage towards the future. And we have been supporting the relations for the benefit of our peoples in the name of security and safety in the region. On the 5th of September, going to mark 35 years since the establishment of diplomatic ties between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Kiribati. These countries strive for promoting well-established ties within getting away with colonial policies, and we combat Nazism And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation is continuing a dialogue with these island states, and usually it takes place on the sidelines of the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York. The 6th of September, the Kingdom of Eswatini is celebrating the Independence Day, and it was establishment of independence after the French protectorate. We have been developing the diplomatic ties, and we coordinate our activities at international venues, first of all in the United Nations and also in economic and humanitarian spheres. We congratulate our friends from Eswatini on this anniversary. The 11th of September marks the 65 years anniversary of establishing diplomatic ties between the Russian Federation and the Federative Republic of Somalia. The Soviet Union played a great role in ensuring independence of Somalia, and hundreds of Soviet specialists helped to build the local infrastructure, and over 20,000 people from Somalia were educated in the Soviet Union. Among them is the former president of the Federative Republic of Somalia, Abul Qasim Salat Hassan, and Abdullahi Yusuf Ahiyad. The Russian-Somalian ties are based on the principles of equality and respect of mutual interests. We continue this dialogue, and we expand foreign trade, and from the 1st to the 5th of June, the chair of the Senate of the Federal Parliament of Somalia visited Russia. And during this visit, there were meetings with the chair of the Federation Council of the Federal Assembly, Ms. Matviyenko, and also the representatives of the State Duma. We expect to continue step-by-step development and expansion of our bilateral relations with Somalia. And from the 17th to the 21st of September, there will be a youth festival assembly in Nizhny Novgorod. The major goal is to establish ties among active young people from all over the world, and they will be working on building the future. The future will be equitable, multipolar world, and will be looking for the right solutions, and over 2,000 young leaders will be taking part in it, and they will represent various spheres: education, digitalization, IT sector, and over 1,000 people will be from abroad, from 120 countries. And it will be possible to attend master classes, to develop their innovative skills, to take part in various studios, activities, and so on. And, I do hope that in addition to this agenda, the guests and participants of this assembly will also learn a lot about the history of the town where this is taking place, Nizhny Novgorod, because it represents the diversity of the Russian culture, and it is an amazing city where various crafts and industries were developing, and one of the most popular crafts, not only in Russia but all over the world, were born and developed there. And this assembly is organized by the Ministry of Youth Affairs and also the government of Nizhny Novgorod Oblast, and there will be also a special course for participants aiming at developing the standing committee and a community for sharing experience and developing skills of the youth community. And in the city of Moscow, the first public assembly will take place. It is dedicated to the Peace Day, World Peace Day, and this will be the venue for communities, various organizations and economic entities, and we expect that representatives of over 150 countries will take place in this assembly, and it is aimed at cultural unification on the basis of trust and international communication. The mission of this assembly is promoting international partnership on the basis of trust and respect towards moral values of all the countries, and it will be implementing various initiatives towards peace and cooperation. There will be 7 panel discussions and 40 different topic-related sessions. Within this assembly, there will be an international media forum, an international business forum of social responsibility of business, international youth forum, and also the Congress of International Writers Association and the Eurasian Festival of National Cultures. Also, there will be a people's diplomacy competition, and will be awarding of the prize for serving humanity and for the exceptional contribution into building trust, peace, and humanitarian cooperation. That's it for now, and now I'm open to your questions. So this will be a hybrid session, because some of the people are taking part in it online. And let's begin with the TV channel Vladivostok. You can be the first. Thank you very much, Ms. Zakharova, for this detailed presentation. Yes, right now we are in the Far East. Yes, and this is true. This is absolutely true. And really, Vladivostok is like the gateway to Asia. And the news we received just before the beginning of this forum, it is that China allows for Russian citizens to enter China without a visa. So what about Russia? Are we going to introduce similar rules? And my second question is about international cooperation. Are there any contacts with Korea and Japan? Because we have been cooperating with them, and we would like to learn more about it. All right, let's first begin with the first question about visas. Yes, that was an amazing news. Yeah, Russia and China. There were many questions about it, and I would like. Let me first listen to. Let me consider those questions that we received before this. Yes, we develop multifaceted relations of mutual trust and non-involvement in internal affairs of our countries. And this is a special example of a very practical approach to relations between the states. And this is eliminating barriers for communication. And definitely an important news was about a testing period for Russian citizens to enter the People's Republic of China without visas. And we really appreciate this news. And this is especially important for people in the Far East. And that was announced right before the president of Russia went to China. And I would like to draw your attention that it is a temporary mechanism, and they have been already tested by China with 47 other countries. But first we need to analyze the results of this without visa trips, and we hope that in future, it will be a long-term measure. And of course, all the citizens from Russia visiting China, they need to follow all the rules, and they should function within the announced purposes of visit. and it is tourism, visiting relatives, transit, and they all should also follow the rules for migration registration. So the total period of staying there without a visa is 30 days, and there should be medical insurance with the appropriate coverage. And we all should understand the reasons for it. So you need to plan for any unexpected or expected events. And so I'd like to draw your attention to this. So as for business trips and study trips, and this includes the media, these trips are not covered by this rule. And, of course, the border officials, they can reject your attempts to visit on some grounds. I'm referring to all this to avoid any inconveniences for Russian tourists. And electronic visas will be available, but I would like to remind you that it is 30 days maximum. There's an agreement with China signed in 2013 for streamlining the border control, and this is also done with Hong Kong and Macau in 2010. There's also multiple visas which are provided for the period up to 6 months if there's a confirmation of booking a room in a hotel and resorts. From August 2023, there's a bilateral agreement on tourist trips, which was initially signed in the year 2000. And currently, we are working out the possibility to limit the number of people in such groups, and also we are going to expand the period during which these people may stay there. And also we'll be developing all the agreements that are functioning already. The detailed material on this topic was published on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs yesterday. And your second question is about contacts with South Korea and Japan. You know, you probably are well aware that this topic is covered regularly in briefings, and there are regular comments on the website, and this is reflected in interviews by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and his statements and his deputies, our ambassadors to those countries. You should understand that changing in relations with these countries is based not on the changes in Russian views on such ties and relations, but it is due to the changes in the policies of those countries. So they are changing their political, economic, and humanitarian relations tracks. So this is done on the other side, and unfortunately we see some negative steps and measures, and they lead to changes in the agenda of our relations with such countries. With some countries we had to pause such relations, and we keep saying about this after specific steps and occasions. Now let's take a broader vision, broader look on South Korea. This has been unchanged. And again, it was not us who caused degradation of the relations. And of course, establishment of a full dialogue is required, but we need to see some steps on behalf of South Korea. And this includes their participation in imposed sanctions against Russia, which is illegitimate. And right now, we don't see any steps from Seoul, and we are going to continue our policy. As for the other state, so they do not only declare some negative steps towards Russia, and Japan also promotes Russophobic statements and stance. They expand their relations with NATO members, and this is all of aggressive nature. And they continue helping the Kiev regime, and they are toughening their rhetoric about some alleged threats from Russia or from North Korea or from China. In such a way, they are trying to justify to their population this course towards militarization. In this respect, we regularly inform the Japanese government that this line of action is a threat towards stability and security in the region. And this leads to another round of arms race. And it eliminates some symbolic security processes that were taking place in the past. And we need to reinstate that in order to develop the bilateral cooperation, and we are neighboring countries, so we need to reinforce it with some specific states, and Japan should neglect their Russophobic statements and approach. And now, Novosti Agency, your question, please, from the audience. Thank you very much. Christina Rodriguez. Oh, yes, I know you. Very nice to hear that. Thank you. I have two questions, and if you allow me, the first one is about the news that the Organization on Cooperation in Europe, they're going to eliminate the Nagorno-Karabakh resolution group. What about, can you say about this? And my second question is, what about the fate of 13 citizens that were arrested in Azerbaijan, and what is done in relation to that?
Let us start with the situation with our citizens. Naturally, our diplomats are in constant contact with the law enforcement agencies and relatives of the arrested individuals. We provide assistance in financing the lawyers for our citizens upon their request. 3 visits of Russian citizens by consular staff have been arranged in Baku on the 3rd, 14th, and 23rd of July. We've applied for a 4th visit, but the Azerbaijani part has not expressed its consent. We hope they will. On the 2nd of July, we asked for information about the state of their health and medical assistance provided. No response so far. At the moment, the Russians are allowed meetings with relatives once a week, up to 1 hour. They can get letters through the lawyers. They are not allowed to place calls from the detention center. We want to emphasize that the release of our citizens is a major step to normalize relations between Russia and Azerbaijan. The topic was discussed in detail on the 22nd of August during the Russian-Azerbaijani Intergovernmental Commission on Economic Cooperation held in Astrakhan. And Russia's position was referred and explained to the Azerbaijani delegation. I think and I hope that over the years, over the decades, I should say, nobody would have any doubts, nobody should have any doubts, and no doubts are left that the Russian Foreign Ministry headed by its leadership, our embassies, our consulates, consular offices at our embassies, our rep offices, consider it a priority to provide assistance to our citizens and compatriots in difficult life situations. And this is not a political slogan, this is not just a line. in our doctrine documents. This is something that is made key by our minister, Sergei Lavra. This is something that young diplomats are taught. This is something that's been tested in practice in many circumstances, be it political persecutions of Russian citizens, and this is what Maria Butina and Viktor Putin, Konstantin Yaroshenko, and many other Russian citizens can tell you about. This also applies to some routine situations that happen to our citizens and compatriots on a daily basis, and this is what our consular staff can talk about at length. This also applies to global shocks such as the pandemic, when the foreign ministry, in cooperation with other bodies, arranged an action called No One is Left Behind, and this applied to all Russian citizens who found themselves abroad during the pandemic. Well, I do realize why this topic keeps re-emerging, but I also know, and I know that the media and the public at large and our human rights activists are confident that the Minister of Foreign Affairs will always stand for Russian citizens, and not just citizens, but also compatriots. And the situation with the Russian mountaineer also demonstrated that we do whatever it takes to provide necessary assistance. So thank you for your interest, and thank you for your engagement. Let me assure you that there is no situation that we would not consider and that we would not try to address and take necessary steps in order to uphold the rights of our citizens and provide them with support. You also asked about the Minsk group, right? Well, on many occasions we commented on the situation with the Minsk group. I will not get back to that, but will provide a link to our previous comments just to demonstrate the integrity of the entire process. And we will introduce the link to the text of today's briefing. Now, as per the silence procedure launched by the Finnish presidency of the OSCE, the Minsk conference on Nagorno-Karabakh settlement, or the Minsk group, or a high-level group of planning, the personal representative of the effective chair. Well, this decision came into force at noon on Central European time on September 1st. Russia, along with other OSCE members, participated directly in taking this decision on the basis of consensus. We consider this step well-grounded, and this is due to dramatic changes in the situation in the region. The initiative was put forward by Armenia and Azerbaijan, and throughout the operation of the Minsk group, the Russian co-chairmanship exerted the maximum efforts to address the tasks and issues needed to ensure peace between the friendly peoples of Azerbaijan and Armenia. Many practices of the Minsk group that have to do with the principles and methods of the settlements contributed to the restoration of peace and stability in the region. And this was stated in the tripartite statement of the leaders of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia in November 2020. The president of China came up with an initiative having to do with the global governance during the SCO summit. How does the Russian party views the initiative put forward by China and its role in building a common fate for humankind? Let me remind you that on September 1st, during the SCO Plus meeting in Shanxi, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, came up with a clear assessment of the new initiative voiced by President Xi, and he expressed his support and he invited colleagues to an in-depth discussion of this initiative. Please. Hello, a person from China. What can I say about the activities that were completed in China? And the meeting attended by President Putin on September 3rd. Well, perhaps I once again would like to thank our Chinese colleagues and friends for extremely well-organized series of events under the China's presidency in the SCO, in terms of receiving the delegations and organizing the military parade on Tiananmen Square to commemorate 80 years since the end of the Second World War. And this applies to a whole range of the political parade, if I may say so, range of negotiations between heads of states who came to the capital of China. I read some reports on that, and I saw some very nice words addressed to the Chinese leadership who arranged such activities at the highest possible level. You know, both in terms of having these events as summits and in terms of sterling arrangements. So once again, China, thank you very much, and I want to thank the Chinese leadership and the Chinese people. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that the assessments of the SCO summit participation and a visit to China and bilateral meetings, well, those assessments were shared by Russian President yesterday. Well, I couldn't even say whether it's yesterday or the day before yesterday. In the last 24 hours. During the last part of his stay in China. I think this is where you would find the complete set of assessments and his personal impressions, too. I can add that on top of what has been said, the official visit became one of the most important events in the political life of our country this year. And the participation of the President of Russia in the SCO summit in Tianjin and the fully-fledged Russian-Chinese summit in Beijing, and about half a dozen, or actually almost 2 dozens of bilateral meetings with foreign leaders. Well, this destroys all the attempts of the West to squeeze in their message of isolation. I don't know what else they came up with. You know, the global majority being second grade or so on. Well, none of the kind. This demonstrates full well the role of our country and the role of like-minded partners in shaping a truly democratic and just multipolar world order. The SCO summit that was held in Tianjin between August 31st and September 1st served as an outcome of a painstaking work to come up with a package of decisions. The initiative of the Russian president to upgrade the working bodies of SCO was implemented. Now, the Universal Center is to be established on the basis of the regional anti-terrorist structure with 2 branches on information security and combating transnational crime. The security policy agenda now includes the establishment of an anti-narcotic center. The partners also supported the Russian proposal on maintaining historic memory as to the heroic deeds of the peoples that put the Second World War to an end. And this is of special relevance now when Nazism is raising its head again. In the context of building consolidated positions on regional and global issues, primarily in terms of establishing a just and multipolar world order and non-politicized cooperation, we should mention the relevance of Tianjin Declaration of the Leaders. Major practical importance is attached to the decisions taken in respect to economy in terms